There's a fundamental flaw in the way I see people doing business today, and it drives me crazy because it's totally flipped on its head of the way that it should be. I've been spending a lot of time in Switzerland because I've been living there over the past few months, and one of the things that has really stuck out to me is the durability of their institutions. And as I look into it more and more and talk to the people there, it really shows that there are business principles that helps you create businesses that do last longer than your lifetime. So one of the first things that I want to talk about is probably the hottest take of the whole thing, which is that we keep putting profits above the service of other people, when in reality, we only make profits in business so that we can have our expenses made and pay our people so that we can continue to serve other people. So profits are the fuel for service rather than the reward for service. My great-great-grandfather in the 1905, something like that, came over to America when he was 19 years old. He had $20 in his pocket, and he started a fur company. And this was around 1913 that he opened his business, and it ended up being this like booming success during the roaring 20s, right? It was so successful that even in the Great Depression, my great-grandmother said she never realized that there was a depression going on in America because their family was so well off because of the fur company. But then as time went on, my great-great-grandfather got old and he wanted to pass it on to his kids. And then certain things changed, the industry changed, people stopped buying furs, there was the animal rights movement, and the whole business kind of collapsed. The burr store closed. And now basically all that's left are the stories that we have from those days, because his children ended up spending all of the money that was kind of left. There were a large sum that was given down when he died, and by the time that my grandfather was, entering the business world, there was nothing left. However, just because, can you open this? Wow. Okay, this is him. Yeah. Just because this business is totally closed now doesn't mean that I have learned nothing from it. So I've really studied the story. This is Michael Hassel. I've really studied his story, and it's like, what made him so successful? Because I feel like I have those same traits, but then also, why was it such a failure when he passed it on to the next generation? And this is him and his kids. And then I visited the fur store a couple of years ago, and it got bought out by some vintage clothing store. But yeah, it's a cool place. And one of the formations of that whole process is kind of what has developed into this video. So I keep saying us people, that whether you say it or not, people end up living out the idea of chasing rapid scaling over building these wide foundations. And I feel like there's such a power in building something real, something substantial. What that allows you to do is, when you're building for the long term, Peter Thiel has this saying, or this premise, that most businesses make all of their money in year 15, 20, 25, 30. And when you're building a business for the purpose of exiting, most businesses might exit in year 8. But if you look at the total profits made over the course of that business, 85% of the whole business's profits would be made post year 15. So from years 15 to 25. And you're kind of leaving a lot of money on the table when you have the mentality of building for an exit rather than building for the purpose of building to last. Over my time in Switzerland, I've been staying in this city that was built around this ancient monastery. It's founded by this Irish monk in like the 500s or something like that. And one of the craziest things about it is that monastery basically invented modern day archive keeping. And the way that they approached it wasn't, how do I protect this document so that I can hand it off to the next generation of monks? They weren't even thinking in terms of generation. It was in terms of, how do we create a system of archives that will never deteriorate? How do we create something that will last forever? And so all of those archives are totally preserved. St. Gallen has the oldest library in Europe, and we see it from the standpoint of their archive keeping, But also we see it in Switzerland with their banking and their watchmaking and their chocolatiering. And these are companies that are multi-century. They go back hundreds of years. And so they have a very, very impressive track record of durability. And it's worth noting. It's worth studying and looking into. So the biggest thing, my biggest takeaway, you compare all the things that I'm looking at to the way people are doing business right now, is that most people who are entering the online business world are looking for creating things along the lines of dropshipping stores, or let's do Forex trading, or let's do crypto trading, or things like this. And what we really need to focus on as a society as a whole is building real businesses. So what is a real business? A real business is essentially a business that solves a problem for a person. And you can kind of make that argument for a lot of things, but I think it's a much easier thing to describe as an example than it is to describe in principle, right? So you can build a dropshipping store around selling phone cases. However, there are 100,000, whatever, other dropshipping phone stores selling the same phone cases at the same price to the same people, and you're just competing on a very easily accessible commodity. And a real business is a business that is going to solve a problem for a long period of time. So what that might look like is McDonald's. They're solving the fast food problem. People want food faster. They want healthy. Okay, they're not solving that problem. They solve other problems. They want fast food. They want cheap food, things like that. And McDonald's has been solving that problem since the 1950s, and they are a real business. So I think that we should be focusing on building real businesses. We don't need the next McDonald's, but we need the next something else. And the way that I've found that in my own experience to do that is you have to find a problem. And the way that you find a problem is dedicating yourself to an industry. So when you pick an industry, before you have the problem, before you have the business idea, it kind of feels counterintuitive. You're like, okay, I don't know what I want to do, but I'm going to isolate all of my potential to one industry. And what that allows you to do is to take a close enough eye that you actually can see the problems that other people aren't going to see. When you're focusing on solving these problems for real people, you're going to see optimizations that could be made, innovations that could be made. There are going to be things that you can do to fix that, whether it's with code or with AI or with just kind of human manpower. There are going to be solutions that you can come up with. The best thing that I found is there are modern tools that will allow you to do that to a great degree. So I've already said AI, coding, and you can combine them and you can create real businesses, but in a way that has lowered the barrier of entry to you no longer need funding. You no longer need this huge acumen of coding experience to be able to do these things. And you can build these real businesses starting out just as a guy on your own. I see these fast money businesses, these kind of fleeting, transient businesses. They're kind of like plastic water bottles where you maybe use them once and then they go into a landfill, or they're just noise. They're digital noise. You can't really get rid of it. You just create things and you put it out there and then it just stays out there, but it doesn't do any good. But you're still dedicating your time and attention, which is a very, very valuable resource, probably the most valuable resource that you have. I've talked a lot on this channel about the currency of attention, and dedicating so much attention to something that is disposable is hardly a good use of our resources. So in a world of fast money, you win by being real. In a world of AI, I mean, you can use AI, but you stand out by being authentic, by being genuine. And so one of the things, there's a few things. So the first thing that I've seen people do, I learned from a mentor of mine. I worked for him a few years ago, and he said the number one mistake the business owners make is they find something that works, and then they take their foot off the gas pedal. So when you find something that starts to work, when you find a solution that's working, you don't stop. You lean into it. You keep going. The other thing is, number two, the business itself is the point. So profits are only the fuel to serve more people. Service itself is the end game. The third point is that you marry the problem So after you've picked an industry, you found the problem you want to serve, and you date the solution. So what that means is, in my case, the problem that I'm solving is I am fixing the transparency in a private charter booking process, and I'm dating the solution. So there's many different ways that you can fix this. You could fix it by being a really good broker. You could fix it by building an AI texting app. You could fix it by building an Amazon type interface. There's a lot of different things that you can do, and I've tried all of them. And you date the solution, but you marry the problem. So as long as you're continuing to solve the same problem, you can take advantage of those compounding effects of learning more and more and more about the industry and about your audience and about the problem itself and things like this. The final point is, businesses don't go out of business because the people lose motivation. They go out of business because people run out of money. And that's why we need profits to be able to continue solving more problems, helping more people. But the way that we do that over a long period of time is we get our costs as low as they can possibly be, and we keep them there. Because as the waves of different seasons and your business booms and then it plateaus, as these waves come in, the only thing that you can count on is your costs being stagnant. And the lower they are, or the higher they are actually, the less of a margin of error you have. And so you can really buy yourself years by keeping your costs low. I'm running all of my websites on softwares that cost me $40 or $50 a month. So by keeping your costs low, you can really, you could make nothing and you could still stay in business. I see a difference between people who are building for the sake of building, people who are in love with the process, people who want to solve those problems, and then groups of people who are building only for the sake of profit itself. So we have visionaries and we have exit-driven founders. And Steve Jobs would never sell his company. You would have to kick him out of his own company. He wasn't building Apple so that he could make a bunch of money. David Senra talks about how he's the host of the Founders Podcast, and he talks about how you couldn't pay Steve to not be working on the problems he was working on because he was so obsessed with fixing those problems, with helping those people. And it's very, very different from, the fifth-time founder, and he only builds for the sake of selling. There is inherently nothing wrong with selling your company, but I think it's still a different category when you're building for the end goal of selling versus building for the end goal of creating something that outlives you. So another person that I've looked at a lot is Jeff Bezos, and he's building Amazon based on constants. So what that means is he's focusing on the things that don't change, whereas other people are like, okay, well, what has changed in the past 10 years and how do I take advantage of that? He's saying what has stayed the same over the past 10 years and what will stay the same over the next 10 years. And he's saying that people will always want more options. They'll always want faster deliveries. And he's built an entire business just around these constants. And that's how Amazon, in my opinion, will be around 100 years from now. We'll see. But that's my honest opinion. So in my time in Switzerland, I've seen the most beautiful cathedrals in the world. And they're just megaliths. I mean, they're truly remarkable. And the craziest thing is that the people who built them did not live long enough to see their completion. And there's still a lot of things that we can learn just from this style of building. So the first is you go very, very wide on the foundation, and you're working on projects that don't go away when you stop working on them. You could put a brick down on a cathedral, and then you could go take a lunch break and come back and your brick is still there. However, if you're working on businesses that are totally time dependent, where you're the guy doing everything, it's so much more of a job than it is a business that will ever outlive you. So my great-great-grandfather's fur business, he was working a job. He was the main furrier, kind of a sketchy name, but he was the main furrier, but he didn't create people. He didn't build people. And because it was just him, he had this job, it disappears when he stops working. And so We really want to be working on projects that will always be there and we can just keep building upon them. And that's where we're going to see the compound growth gains. The other thing is that we need to be willing to plant seeds of trees that we will never reap the benefits of. And that's okay. And that comes with liking the work itself. When you are appreciative of the work, there are going to be the majority of profits, which are enjoyable, but the majority of those profits will not be for you, at least at this time. And that's okay. It's really okay. You have to be willing to be ready to kind of pass the mantle on to the next person. And the way that you do that is by sharing your vision, your mission, your purpose. Why are you serving these people? Why do you want them to be helped? Why do you see them being helped as an honorable goal? And so when other people are joining in on your vision, then now you have a following. Now you have a legacy to pass it on. This is the cathedral there. It's quite a cool place. I was there over Christmas as well. So yeah. So TimeFlys is my business. It's a charter booking platform, and it all started from the why, the mission of why I'm doing this in the first place. So my goal, which is something that I'm going to be working on for the rest of my life, I'm commoditizing the utility of private travel. Henry Ford envisioned every household in America having a car parked out front of its driveway. And people thought that was stupid. People were still using horses then. I see a similar future for private travel. In the same way that we saw those ownership of cars as just totally normal, with the advent of electric flying and with autonomous flying and the breakthroughs that I've seen with supersonic and with vertical takeoff and landing, we're really going to not recognize private travel 10 years from now or 15 years from now. And there's going to be a market of people who could not afford to fly private right now, but will be able to fly it later on if the utility of it was commoditized. So the luxury doesn't have to be commoditized, but the utility of being able to have access to your own aircraft. This is going to be huge for the world in 10 or 15 years. And I'm dedicating myself to that purpose of bringing that to the world. The problem that I'm solving right now is, right now charter bookings take forever, right? Multiple hours, maybe multiple days, and it's totally monopolized by brokers. Every operator that I talk to says that 80% of their business is coming from brokers. And there's no transparency. So if an operator does a good job, the broker gets the thanks because the operator's name is kind of pushed down. And so what I've been able to do is build an automated system that allows you to compare every available charter from every nearby aircraft, from every operator, all in one place. And it's totally, think of it like Google Flights, where you can see all of your options of Delta, United, American, all in one place for any search that you make. And there's no, contact info required just to get started or paywall, or it's totally free. And I've been able to build this very valuable tool with the help of some of the tools that I've talked about. So everything that I am talking about, these principles are all being lived out in my life. I'm kind of a use case for these principles that I'm talking about. So kind of as an overview, the things that we want to focus on is thinking very, very long term. So past ourselves. The other thing is we're building for people, not for profits. So the goal is to use profits to continue to serve more people and in a greater capacity and serve them better, serve them for longer periods of time. That's the goal. And the more you do that, the more profits you will generate, the more you can take care of your family, the more you can live the life that you want. But the profits is not the reward. The profits is fuel for the fire. So keep the fire going. We really want to be working on difficult problems, real problems that will take you years to go through, because when you are solving these big problems, you're going to have a greater burning desire inside of yourself to work towards solving those problems. If they were simple problems, you wouldn't be willing to dedicate yourself 20 years to solving it. And 20 years is where you see all of those gains. So working on big enough problems that allows you to stay interested for a long enough period of time is the move. And the last thing is we want to stand by our principles to a T the whole way through. And if you don't have your list of principles developed, then now's a good time to get started, because I couldn't recommend living by your principles more. It's an honorable way of living. It's satisfying when you stand by your principles and it works out. And my YouTube channel is just kind of all of the principles that I have and I live by. And this is just the way that I share it. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope it was useful to you. These are things that I will continue to kind of develop and work on. As I learn more, I'll share more. And this is just my step in the process right now. So thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.